Hello and welcome to GMBN This is one of the Ask shows where you use hashtag askgmbntech down in the comments of any of our videos, and me or Doddy will pick it up and try and answer it for you. So don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel and give us a big old thumbs up so we can keep making these videos. But let's just dive straight in. My first question from Jargo says, would I benefit more from using better calipers or better levers? For example, SLX levers with XTR calipers or XTR levers with SLX calipers. So yeah, you're right, they're interchangeable. So obviously we're talking levers and calipers here. And the differences between XTR and SLX, you've asked, is that XTR focuses so much on performance in terms of lightweightness, whereas SLX is more robustness and affordability. Technically, the stopping power on both are incredible. They're both good. The performance is the same, but XTR is about 70 grams lighter as a pair. And they do this by more expensive materials and better techniques. So for an XTR caliper, this whole body here is one single cold forged piece of titanium, whereas this is an SLX actually. You can see there's a seam down the center where it's sort of merged or bonded together. So it's just different techniques. Whether that makes it better or not necessarily. I've used both and I love them equally. I do prefer the lever fill on XTR. I've got to say the shape is slightly different and you do get kind of little dimples that are nice and grippy, especially if you don't wear gloves. But it is a minor thing considering XTR is 70 grams lighter, but it is almost twice the price of SLX. So I think you need to think about what you're looking for. When you say benefits, it won't be in terms of stopping power. It tends to be more in lightweight stuff. So if you're XC riding, you might find if you're racing that you would prefer a lighter bike, and 70 grams does matter to you. Whereas if you're trail riding and you want something that is the same power but more affordable or better reliability in terms of materials, you might want to think about SLX altogether. So the question is, do you really want to make the two go together for not much benefit? But I personally would say maybe consider putting that extra money that you would have put into XTR lever or caliper, whichever you were thinking, into better discs. I find that discs are so important and overlooked. Something like the Shimano ice technology, which is a kind of sandwich of material, which keeps them super stiff and straight, but also it dissipates heat really well, which improves the performance of your braking. Or also if you super enduro trail rider and you do have the budget, maybe even the freezers, which has the cooling fins, which if you can cool down your brakes, then you have better performance for longer, especially on really long descents. And I rate these and these ones, to be honest, so much more than, you know, trying to save money on discs. And also, you know, when you've got that money left over from not spending on XTR, if you don't need the lightweight, then you can spend them on some really good brake pads as well. Maybe even some of the fins which fit in the SLX models, and I really rate those for cooling properties as well, just keeping them more reliable on long descents too. So consider some other things that you'll be spending some money on, I would say. Julius Salvador says, are Shimano 12-speed chains compatible with Sram 12-speed drivetrains? So technically, yes. You're obviously talking about 12-speed with 12-speed. You have to have a 12-speed chain so that it meshes with the measurements of a 12-speed cassette. What I will say is the SRAM cassette that you have Hyperglide compatible. Some are, some are not. So with a Shimano chain, if it is Hyperglide, then the smallest parts, the inner widths, are quite narrow. They're really small, and that gets hooked up on Hyperglide cassettes, but so that they change gear better effectively. Whereas if your cassette is not Hyperglide compatible, then that link might be so small that it actually gets a little bit jammed, or it might get a little bit of chain suck around the cassette and it just might not work as well or at all. So the answer is yes and no. Some SRAM are compatible with those 12-speed Shimanos if they are both Hyperglide and both Hyperglide compatible, or if they're non-Hyperglide, then they're probably gonna work okay. Illyriano6 says, looking to install pedal extenders on a trail bike, what would be the pro and con of them? I didn't even know these were a thing. I had to look them up. So you're possibly talking about extending the length of your axles, I get the spindle of your pedal. And I personally, I run Crank Brothers, and I have run long spindle Crank Brothers, some E-mallets, and also the short spindle ones as well. And there's quite a difference. It's maybe about 5 mil, so probably 10 mil in difference for your stance on the bike. I personally don't notice a massive difference when I'm riding. But when I run the short spindles, the backside of my heel rubs on the seat stay of my bike, which is really annoying. And so I do prefer a wider stance for that reason, because you know, just the clearance feels really good. So I understand why you're doing it. I've never tried the pedal extenders. I would look around at maybe some reviews and see if they're any good. Are they reliable? Otherwise, maybe consider just buying a pedal that does have a longer spindle instead, because that's more likely to be reliable as like a one piece made to that measure. If you use pedal extenders that go too wide, there is a potential to put added stress on the cranks themselves, or the bottom bracket of your frame, or the actual bottom bracket itself. In theory, I've not heard that happen before, but it is potential. So that's your pros and cons there. So moving on to Kai W, who says, I'm thinking of stripping my alloy frame of paint and going raw for a clean look. Is there any disadvantages to this? Not exactly. So raw aluminium, aluminium doesn't rust as such, it does corrode over time, and you don't want that. You don't want to damage your frame, you don't want to worry about the reliability of it potentially fatiguing or cracking because it's corroded over time. Even bikes that you see in the shops that are raw aluminium, they're not technically raw aluminium. They would be anodized or clear coated to protect that surface. So I would say, no, there's no disadvantage to taking the paint off if it's done properly. But I would put a clear coat over the top of it to stop it from corroding. So you can get some spray clear coats, something. You can even get matte satin finishes, and you can get bike specific ones too, if you want it to still look natural and not be glossy. Luc Lagrange says, I'm a young, keen XEO rider. I bought a Scott Scale 900 comp, and it come with SX drivetrain. Just before a race, my derailleur bent badly. I was told that SX would not last anyway, as most of it was just hard plastic. I bought an NX derailleur thinking it was going to work a lot better, and a few months later it had bent again. Is this a SRAM problem, as I have not spent enough money to get the GX up, and don't know if this is a problem for racing. So your derailleur, okay, I don't think there's a lot of plastic in the NX derailleur. I'm pretty sure, I don't have one present, pretty sure they're metal anyway. So I'm not sure how you're bending the derailleur. My question is, are you definitely bending the derailleur, or are you bending the hanger that is attaching the derailleur to your frame? So it would be that little bit of metal between the derailleur and your frame. And they are meant to be soft pieces of metal so that when you bang your derailleur, that piece of metal will bend, and A, it can be bent back, or B, if it's too far gone, it can be replaced. So if you can work out if that is out of line, or if you have one of these, this is a derailleur hanger alignment gauge. If you can get hold of one of these, borrow one of these from a friend, or take your bike to a shop and ask them whether you've bent your derailleur or your hanger, they'll probably use one of these to work it out. And this will help you effectively screw it into that little piece of metal, the hanger, with the derailleur off, and you can work out, you move it around the wheel to see if it is bent in any places, if it is skewed, and then you can bend it back into a straight position and you put your derailleur back on and you're good to go again. You might want to invest in one of those if you find you're regularly knocking your derailleur anyway. Give it a straighten, replace that hanger. If you would prefer to replace the hanger, they're not that expensive these days. And put the derailleur back on and see if it's a problem again. I'm probably willing to put money on it that is your derailleur hanger rather than your derailleur. So in terms of is it a problem? I don't think it is really your derailleur that might be a problem. Maybe buy a spare hanger if you're not willing to invest in the tool and see if that fixes the problem, because it probably will. And that's my last question. So thank you guys for sending in your questions. As always, if you're watching this show and you have a burning question for me or Doddy, then do use hashtag askgmbntech down in the comments and we'll try and get back to you. Thank you.